Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that day, Oliver, we met Oliver, and it was kind of funny because I was like, man, this guy really likes his windows, right? He was talking because we're touring a property that we own now. It's a 50-year-old property.
Yeah.
And, my partner, Ben, really, he likes his fences. So if there's a fence that's not straight, he's like, we need to put the money in and straighten it up. That's his thing, right? And then I had Oliver, and he's like, man, these windows, like, are they going to be okay? And I'm like, relax, Oliver. That's how it is with these older properties, right? We're not going to go dump all this money to replace it, right? And so, but now Oliver has me noticing the windows on every property I check, right? Like, I kind of look for it. I'm like, Oliver's not going to like these windows, right? But
yeah.
And it's funny because we have a property now we're doing together in Atlanta. All the windows are getting replaced by the airport, right? So Oliver's excited about that one.
Yeah, no, totally am. And it's so true. It's like I went on that property in the beginning, and like I was looking at, I was focused on the wrong things. I was focused on what was wrong instead of what was right with that property, because we've created like $4 million worth of value in almost 18 months, and my focus was on what was wrong instead of what was right. And I appreciate Feras for just.
No, but it's good to notice the wrong too, right? I can't be on there oblivious about these things. It's more, keeping it in the back of my mind. And so, I mean, it's a win-win, right? But yeah, I mean, whenever you're newer, it's easier to see what's wrong, right? Let's talk about, really the deal in Atlanta. I think that's a great example, dude, Marketplace Square. Because I know so many people that passed on that thing, right? And, people go there and it's like, yeah, it kind of looks good, but there's all these down units, and what am I going to deal with that, et cetera. But that's the kind of deal that, you get your mind past, and you're like, man, this is where you make some real money, right, Oliver? So that's a deal that we're hopefully close to getting, sold, and you're going to do very well on that deal. And so
yeah,
it's important to kind of know the wrong and maybe have a plan to just, I like to say, have a good enough plan to not land on a grenade, right? Yep. You're never going to know everything about everything, right, about a deal, but really kind of go in and you start to learn to be overcapitalized, even, plan everything you need to, but then also have extra capital. And it's better just to say, hey, we want to raise additional money. We're going to give it slightly less return. It's going to be nominal, and just be resilient than to kind of go and undercapitalize. And we've made that mistake several times. And so you start to learn all the things to kind of do differently. But
yeah. And that's also another benefit of having partners too, Feras, is because like, you're never going to see everything on your own. Like you have your vision, but like when you have partners and they think differently, like you think differently than I do. Like you're great with operations and all of those things that go along with that, and like scaling, right? Where I'm like a get it done, like construction. I love that stuff. So like I see one way, you see a totally separate way, but you're covering my back. You're seeing a different way that I couldn't have seen. So it goes back to like that story about the Clydesdales, like you got one Clydesdale can pull 8,000 pounds, and you'd think you'd add another Clydesdale, and that would, now all of a sudden you have two, you'd be able to pull 16,000 pounds. But what actually really happens is you're actually able to pull 24,000 pounds together. And I don't know why that is, but like, that's just the way the universe is set up. So like, I'm going to tap into that every single day,
No, I agree. I tell people the reason I love real estate, right? Because again, I came from the tech world as a Microsoft and had a software company. And like a lot of you, I started investing passively. I started just investing in real estate. My very first purchase was a fourplex that happens to be like a mile away from our office now, right? Very first purchase of real estate. I remember the day I bought the thing. And, at the time, I remember my dad was just like, well, what are you getting yourself into, man? You don't know anything about real estate, right? And, that was the first purchase, and then bought a bunch of houses, and then realized it doesn't scale, right? Was going to go do a small apartment, and luckily found out more about syndication and really fell in love with it, right? Because it's people, it's numbers, and it's systems and processes, right? Yeah. So that's kind of why I like it. And the people thing is really powerful because, we've been able to grow Disrupt Equity, I'd say, very quickly and do things well because we're willing to not do it all, right? We want partners. We want to bring people on and help them grow, and we all grow together, right? And so,
yeah. And that was like a little preview of Feras. Like let's dig it back and go on behind the curtain a little bit, Feras. Can you tell me where you're from? Like, can you give us a little bit of background about you?
So, I'm based here in Houston. This beach is not Houston, for those that don't know. Grew up in Houston, went to college in Austin. Spent the first year and a half, my father's a doctor, thought I wanted to be a doctor. After a year and a half, I hated it. It was just, all memorization. I'm more a problem solver. And so I jumped to really computer science, which was a natural fit. High school, instead of having a regular job like most people in high school or whatever, I had my own web company and it was doing pretty well for high school. I remember the first day, there was this one example where I asked my dad to loan me like $1,500 and he actually went for it. Right. And just cause I was buying a website from somebody. And then 6 months later, I sold that same website for 10 grand. And so I was like, yeah, that's a lot of money for, being a whatever, 14, 15-year-old at the time. And so, I got a taste for the entrepreneurship. Right. And really maybe to give the story, I think it's actually a powerful story. Right. Because for me, I started, somehow I kind of fell into just building websites. Right. And I built this game and I used to I forget what I called it, but I know the guy, basically it was a game that was all real stock data, fake money, right? One of the first ones. And so you can go create an account, you get $100,000 of fake money. And, it's really meant to help people practice the stock market, right? Because it is tied to Yahoo data. And so I sold this game. And at the time I sold, it was this thing that I coded up in like 3 days, right? Spent 3, full days, knocked this thing out. And I sold it to a guy for, I don't remember the amount. I think it was like $1,500, $2,000, which for me, I'm like, man, that's a lot of money, right? Again, I'm like a 14-year-old. And I realized, the guy that I sold it to, he owned bored.com. So if you're bored, BORED.com, that was his platform, right? And the trick was almost every site he linked to was a site that he owned. So it's all, keeping all that traffic in the same ecosystem. And, I kind of I started to see entrepreneurship, right? But more importantly, the guy hired me to do a couple more fixes to the thing I sold him, right? And I realized he was making like $2-3 grand a month from this thing that he paid me $2 grand for, right? And so, I kind of got a taste for that early on. But yeah, I went to college, realized bio-pre-med, not my thing, switched to computer science, natural fit. I did really well there. And, interned at Microsoft, then went full-time Microsoft. And it's funny because I have a story there too. I had an offer from Microsoft and Amazon, right? And this is, early on, when Amazon was not that big. And the guy that I know at Amazon, he's a friend to this day. I gave him this sleazy excuse of why I went to Microsoft. I'm like, yeah, my parents know the name better. It's a bigger company. It's going to look better on a resume. Well, fast forward like 5-6 years ago, the guy messages me on Facebook. He's like, your parents still think Amazon not as big, because that was the day Amazon passed Microsoft in market cap, right? So, I didn't go to Amazon route, went the Microsoft route. The entire time I was there, Microsoft was flat on valuation, right? That was kind of the old days of Microsoft. I left Microsoft. Now Microsoft's been skyrocketing, but left Microsoft, started a software company and had that for, went for 4 or 5 years, I think, ish. And coincidentally, the last thing we were building was property management software, right? And so I kind of got a taste actually on the real estate side. And that started because there was a problem I had, right? Which is there was not a good tool, because like I mentioned, I started buying houses, right? There was not a good tool for kind of the retail house investor, right? Around how do I keep track of all my properties? How do I collect online payments, and how do I really build a nice, simple system? So that's what we started building. The problem is I learned, we pivoted and we went down this other thing because we wanted to make a lot more revenue, but that was a bad idea. Now I realize all of the mistakes that we did, right? But yeah, kind of did that, and similarly started to get more into larger apartments, right? And started Disrupt Equity with my partner, Ben, who I met at a meetup, right? Like these things, that goes back to, it's a people thing, right? And, kind of Disrupt Equity itself, we buy assets in Texas and Georgia. And we, vertically integrated. We have our own house management company and looking to continue to grow. So
that's awesome, man. There's so many little stories in that story that get me like fired up. I told you.
Yeah, and I'm a pretty candid, transparent guy. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk whatever people get the most value out of. So
Yeah. So you said in that story that your dad, when you bought that quad, right? He wasn't like, hey, what are you doing? He was like, kind of like, what are you doing here? So what was your family's like thought process on investing and growing up?
Yeah, I mean, my dad, I think for many reasons, right? Like, he never really got into just investing in general, right? That wasn't the mentality that he had, right? It was all, and his mentality is always, go at the snail's pace, right? Like dip your toe in, then dip your foot in, then dip your leg in, then maybe, my dad's a beach guy. He throws himself in the ocean, but that's really kind of the, I remember several times he's like, you need to slow it down a little bit. Like, but I'm like, no. And I've covered, the thing is not to, so in general, right? Maybe the way I get into things, right? I'm a guy that likes to learn a lot of different things. And I like to learn enough to where I'm comfortable enough to make a step forward, right? Again, without falling on a grenade. And I think that's the important thing, right? I go to a lot of events, a lot of meetups. There's a lot of people that have analysis paralysis, right? They will find every excuse to never go do anything, right? Mine is more about, I've learned enough, I've educated enough, and I hop in. And so real estate, I mean, I listened, this is before the heyday of podcasts, right? But the one big podcast at the time was the Bigger Pockets one. I remember I plowed through the first like 120 episodes, you know, in the span of like 3 months, read a lot of different books and kind of really knew a lot about it, right? And so hopped in, did that one. And, you know, I had structured those things to make sure I wasn't going to fall in a grenade, right? Like I knew, I mean, the fourplex is an easy one, right? Like one of those things was, you know, was a housing authority payment, right? And so that money was always coming in, plus there's 3 other units, and really off of the 2, I was already covering everything, right? And again, I had enough cash reserves that if this thing was going to sit vacant for a year, I'm good, right? So be smart about it and, you know, continue that growth. But yeah, he was always about going the very slow pace, right? Or not investing enough, unfortunately, right? And I'm lucky that I guess I kind of totally went the other direction, right? My dad was not an entrepreneur in that sense, right? He was more, you know, again, a doctor, right? My dad was the kind of guy that will lock himself in a room for 12 hours, and I kid you not, lock himself in a room for 12 hours and just study.
Yeah.
So,
How did you start thinking the other way though? You know?
man, that's a great question. I think, like I said, it was a story at the beginning where I just, you know, I got into web development. It was fun. I was making like websites for game, you know, my own like fun, stupid little toy websites, right? Yeah. And then I realized that, well, hey, you know, people will pay for some of this stuff. And so I did that, and you know, I guess I got a taste for it, right? And running into people like the guy I mentioned with board.com and selling him that game and realizing like, wow, this guy's making millions of dollars a year off of these web things, right?
Yeah. No, I think you actually just hit it, and it created like a huge aha for me just right now. It's experiences, right? Like you experience, like even though your parents were one way, you had an experience that were like, wow, this guy just paid me $1,500. And then you got to see behind the screens where he was making $2,000 a month on it. So you got the experience that there's real money out there. Yeah. So it didn't matter what anybody else was telling you. You knew deep down in your heart what was the right way to go.
Yeah. And, yeah. And he was making 2,000 from that one. He had 30 of these properties, like 40 of these properties. And so, yeah, you know, I kind of got a taste for that. And maybe even around that same time, or maybe right before that, I was playing a game called Diablo 2, right? Again, similar. It's a game that basically, you know, you're a character, you're going out fighting monsters, for those who don't know, and you get items. But in that game, right, I learned a lot about trading and negotiating, right? Because I remember, you know, you start off, it's like there was a story of a guy who I think he started off with, I forget what he did, like a paperclip, and his goal was to buy a house, right? And like all he was doing was trading up and try to wheel and deal and get a better item. So now, you know, maybe I give you the paperclip and you agree to, because you needed that paperclip, you gave me a pencil, right? And you work your way up. And so same thing in Diablo 2, and to the point where, you know, I had all these items, and, you know, I remember a guy mailed me like $300 of cash, and I never thought I'd get it in the mail. And I don't know as a high schooler why I would give my address to a guy online, but anyways, I actually got the cash, right? And you kind of, you know, you start to see like, hey, I can do things and generate cash immediately, right? And it's not about a degree, not about anything. It's about having a plan and being willing to go for it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man.
So yeah, all those things got to happen at the same time, and yeah, you know, so it's just kind of, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that, because that's really powerful. And your thought process and how you actually came to the understandings, because it wasn't something that was like ingrained in your household, you know? Yeah, because for me, like I saw my dad, like he had a construction company, so I saw the highs, but I also saw the lows. Like I saw that, you know, like you can make money in this thing, but you can also lose money in this thing, and you can create a lot of pain for your family. So that's good that you figured that out and you kept moving forward on it. Yeah, so I know you said that you did the 4 units. So like what got you into like the bigger properties? So I know now you're doing 100+ unit properties.
Yeah, that story. So, and I bought the fourplex, right? But before I bought it, I was still in Seattle. I knew I was moving to Houston at the time, right? And like, I didn't even go see the property, right? And so my very first real estate purchase, and what I did is I was searching on Bigger Pockets because I needed an agent to transact it. And so I searched Bigger Pockets, and I came across this guy. His name is Paul. And I remember calling him up. I'm like, hey, I've already run all the numbers. I've already talked to the broker. I've already done it. I'm going to buy this thing. I just need someone to transact it. So basically, it's a free business for him. It's like, yeah, sure, right? So, you know, he transacts it. I have one of my good friends from college who partnered with me on it, right? He was here in Houston. He went and looked at it, and we're good to go. And so bought that property. Well, Paul was also doing kind of flipping on the side. And, so I kind of tossed him a bone, right? Free business. And like literally 2 months later, he's like, hey, we have this other property that, they were doing mailers for houses, right? To flip. And this other property, doesn't really work as a good flip, but it's a great rental. And then we looked at it like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. That was a property we bought for, I think we bought it for $130,000. The sellers needed to stay in it for another month because they were trying to, buy their next house. So I'm like, golden. And that house, I still have it. It's worth $200,000 and it's been rented the whole time, right? So I bought that house and then bought several more. And I guess for me, I quickly started to realize that the single family approach, right? For those unit, I mean, you can get wealthy in real estate a million different ways, right? And the thing with real estate is it's not about timing the market, it's time in the market. And I totally believe that, right? Not timing the market, it's time in the market, meaning with enough time in real estate, time solves a lot of problems, right? And for me, I got to 12 units. I just realized it doesn't scale well, right? It's like, okay, 12, and because I had a fourplex and I had another duplex and then a bunch of houses and a condo, and it just doesn't scale, right? It comes just it's a little bit of a grind, right? And I'm like, well, this isn't like a business, right? This is like a married couple. One person is kind of doing this full time and the other person's working their day job. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But for me, I loved it. It was fun. I'm like, I want to go bigger, right? And how do I go to the next thing? And it's funny because there was an apartment complex, a 32 unit, right? So there's a 32 unit that was kind of here. In my head, I was like, okay, I'm going to buy like a 25 to 40 unit, right? And I knew I had like my father-in-law and another friend, and we could pull together the money, right? Because at the time, the things were like $40,000 a unit, right? It's $1.6 million, right? Yeah, $1.6 million ish, which means, we'd have to bring $600,000 to close, $700,000 to close. I'm like, I could do that. And so, there's a 32 unit in Conroe, which is kind of northern Houston, that was for sale. And I went out there and I'm like, I'm going to win this thing. Didn't win it. Right. But it's funny because at the time the broker's name was Jordan Emmett. And, me and him had coffee. We got to know each other a little bit. Well, I didn't win that one. And I found out about syndication, right? Because I didn't know about what syndication was at the time, right? Like, yes, I heard these guys were buying these things. And I didn't really connect the dots. And I was really doing more of a JV was my plan for that smaller one. And so found out about syndication, was going to meetups, met my partner, Ben. And, I went to Atlanta and there was this apartment that was 99 units. I'm like, I could buy that, right? I knew enough. I could, at the time it was like a $1.5 million raise. I'm like, I can, syndicate the rest. And, I can talk enough people into trusting me and let's get this done. And, at the time, my partner, Ben, had already done a deal, right? He didn't have, he was looking for a deeper partner, right? He had kind of his previous partnership and it wasn't really like a business, right? And so the timing worked out well because I was going to go buy this thing regardless. And I was talking to Ben, I'm like, hey, you want to do this together? And so we got a taste, right? To kind of try it out together. We did that first property. That's a property we sold a year and a half ago. And, been rock and rolling since then.
That's awesome.
And then maybe to tie it back to Jordan. So it's funny because it's about a year ago, Jordan had a really big property for sale, like a $50 million deal. And I was asking him for information on that. And he's like, man, I don't get how you went from 32, asking me about a 32 unit to like a $50 million deal. And I told him the same thing. I'm like, well, I don't know how you listed a 32 unit and then you listed a $15 million deal, right? So people grow, right?
Yeah. So what do you think was the pivotal point or the pivotal thing that happened to help you grow into that person that could go do a 100 unit property?
Good question. I think it's, I'm younger, right? My career is 20, 30 years. My wife tells me, do you ever do anything short term? Because everything I'm planning is longer term, right? And it's about doing deals that you're not going to basically blow up on, right? Or, make a quick buck. I know a lot of people, it's easy to buy a deal, right? I know a lot of people that are new think, okay, the buying is the hard part. It's really the operating is the hard part and performing and eventually getting to what you've told investors you're going to get them, right? And so, making sure you're getting the deals that you're comfortable that you can perform on, right? Because that leads to more investors. Our best investors are the ones that tell their friends, right? On that deal that we mentioned, I mean, the investors made stupid amounts of money, right? That from just that set of investors, I think we had, 15 people on that one. they brought in another 15 people, right? And so I think it's really getting into deals, and these are the hard deals, right? Even that Atlanta deal that we just talked about. I mean, I'm thankful every day that I had Oliver on that deal because it's easier for him to get to, right? I can get to Atlanta pretty quickly too, but he's out of DC, but it's his expertise, right? That property was more construction than anything, right? And getting down units is not a trivial thing to go, but it's a hard property, but it's going to be strong returns, right? And so really kind of being willing to do the harder stuff if it needs to, right? That's kind of my MO. I like to do the things that are harder that most people won't do because now I immediately have a smaller playing field or maybe a bigger playing field, right?
Okay. So you said a couple things there. So it's like, so the question I was asking you was like, what sparked in you that go from like a smaller property to the bigger property? And you said something about like creating value. So I love that point because like when you're buying real estate, you're always buying real estate where you can go in and add value to it. It just keeps you protected. So that was the one point that you made there. But what was the main thing that like got you to like go from like these smaller properties to like wanting to do a bigger property? Was it like wanting to be around other people and doing with partnership or like what?
It was that it made sense mathematically, right?
Okay.
That's maybe because, with a 32 unit, I always knew I was going to struggle. Even on that property I gave you, they had a temporary manager there that like her son was the maintenance guy sometimes. And, it's not a full blown business, right? Like it's not big enough to support full-time staff. And so that's why whenever we buy, we want to stick to kind of 80 and up, right? I want to have full-time on-site, full-time maintenance, right? Now those are people that can be coached, can be managed, can be put a system in place to help them, operate that one. And, it starts to scale. Maybe that's what it is, right? So I knew I had to make the leap out of the 32 to the bigger because of that reason.
Got it.
And I knew that I could get there and, I knew just enough to probably put together enough money from enough people, and get to that closing for that first one.
Got it. So like basically the 32 unit was going to be more of like a transactional thing where it probably was even going to take more of your time.
Absolutely.
Like the 80, 100 plus unit properties is going to be more transformational for you, the growth of your business and just the whole model of like what you were trying to do and create. Right.
Absolutely.
Got it. Cool. So you were talking about that deal that did sell in Atlanta, that your first one that you bought there. And you said that those investors brought more investors, which is awesome. What do you think was like the biggest aha moment in that deal for those investors?
The biggest aha moment. I mean, so that was a hard deal, right? Again, and like I've made these same mistakes several times and I know to never make these again on these deeper rehabs, right? And it was a hard deal. It was a deal that, you learn to know who you buy from, right? Like we're buying a deal right now. One of the biggest management companies that had it for 30 years. Like I know they've taken care of that deal. I mean, I could see it. I walk on the property, you can tell, right? On this Atlanta deal, these are guys that accidentally had an apartment that should have never owned an apartment, right? And everything about it had issues, right? And, it was a rough tenant base. There was all sorts of problems. And again, we kind of knew that some of this, but again, it's my first deal. So I didn't know what the norm and what the not norm was, right? And so, with that deal, we had told investors there's just no returns the first year. Like that is what we presented, right? But then we knew we can get to the cash flow and kind of show this up. And so, the aha moment for that deal was once, because that deal we bought it was, I think on paper, like 80% occupied, right? But we had to bring the occupancy down to 40%, right? Because we knew we had to get a community going. Could not be drug dealers or prostitutes, any of that stuff. We literally very early on, we have this awesome, if anyone needs a security company in Atlanta, let me know. This guy named Joe, but he's got like all former police officers and they got, I forget what they call it. They're something squad. And he has this picture of them all, these muscular guys with these guns, but like literally they put the property on curfew and lockdown, right? And they know everybody coming in and they're walking and patrolling. And, for the drug dealers, they know like, hey, I can't stay around here very long, right? And I remember on that deal, the drug dealers always pay their freaking rent, right? And you start to realize like you get rid of the two problematic property, the units, the property transforms, right? And I remember there's this one unit that we're just waiting because the security will try to find a reason that, you know, if they're doing something wrong, to be allowed to evict them, right? Well, you know, with this unit, we couldn't quite do it, but we finally waited until their lease expired. We didn't renew them, right? And I mean, yeah, like night and day, right? The property changes. The kids start to come out. People start to feel the community. Then we start to invest in things like the playground. And so, you know, for me, it was kind of seeing that bottom where, you know, I remember the time where you're like, man, you know, you're losing 20 grand a month, 30 grand a month, right? And my partner, Ben, is like freaking out. And I'm like, relax, that's what we modeled. Like, we planned for this, right? Like, yeah, you see it in the red now. And yeah, there's still down units, all those problems, but that was actually the plan. But it was just amazing to see how quickly we went from 40% occupancy to 95%, like literally in the span of 4 months, right? Boom, 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 95. And now you're, instead of losing 20, 30 grand, you're making 30 grand, right?
Right. And when you say losing 20 grand, I mean, I want to just frame that a little bit because, like when you're in business, like if you're just focusing on the immediate right here, right now, like you're always going to lose. Like this is a game where it's like business and entrepreneurship, like the real minds are always thinking about the back end. Like that was a part of the business model. And you said it there. That's a part of the business model, was to get occupancy down so that it could go up. Because that's one thing that we're doing here. We're changing communities. Like we're building communities actually, because like that property was 100 units, but like the kids were scared. They were inside. The whole people were living in fear because there was a couple bad apples there that were basically terrorizing the neighborhood. But Feras goes in there, cleans it up, and now all of a sudden kids are outside playing around on the playgrounds and enjoying themselves. So that's like one of like the core things that I love about this business, is that we're like transforming people's lives because we're affecting where they spend probably most of their time is at their home, you know?
Yeah. No, and it's very much, I mean, what's cool about this business is it really is about putting a plan and then executing on it, right? And it's cool to see the results of it, right? Versus like if you have your own business, you know, your plan is, okay, I'm going to grow the business 10% this year, right? But that was probably, okay, I might hire on another person. I might, you know, do more sales, whatever it is. That's not as transformational as a plan as some of these things that we do at these properties, right? Where I'm going to take it down to 40. It's going to be empty. We're going to lock it down. Now we're going to bring it up to 95 and we're going to repaint the whole thing. It's a lot more, it's a lot more of the plan is visual, right? Which is kind of cool sometimes. And even like one of our San Antonio properties, I mean, again, we just redid all the siding, redid all the balcony, and it looks so different, right? And it's cool to see that versus, you know, a lot of business plans are less transformational. So, you know, I guess there's less to see and less to get excited about sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's really good. So where are you headed next? Like, where do you see Disrupt going in like the next like 5-10 years?
Next 5-10 years? That's a great question. I mean, you know, we want to continue to buy, right? You know, it's Disrupt Equity. It's not Disrupt Multifamily, right? Multifamily is what we do A to Z. We have our own management company. We think management is a dated business. Like I'm doubling down on that and really trying to get that to be kind of best in class. And property management is a hard business, people. Like it's a hard business. But it's just a dated business. And so again, I've constantly looked at what things are kind of dated and how do you apply things that are normal from the software world, right? To just really make these things a lot more efficient, a lot more powerful, a lot more impactful. So doubling down on management, right? And doing that best in class. And we're already doing third-party management, but really build out the back end that I want to scale. But, you know, that's so we can do multifamily A to Z, right? Sourcing, you know, managing, et cetera, along the way with partners, right? I mean, it's still not going to ever be just us. I don't want it to be just us. It's less fun to do just us, right? It's good to have, like Oliver said, other guys to talk to, bounce ideas on, and everybody has their own little, you know, network of people, right? And so you never know what a partner may know that could help solve an immediate problem, right? Oh, we just got nuked on taxes. Oh, well, I know the mayor of this city. Let's go talk to him. You never know, right? So partners are valuable in a lot of ways, not just ideas, not just on, you know, their specific role. It's a lot of different things that you might not realize the value of that point in time. And I think a lot of people really fixate on what is your immediate contribution, not what is your bigger contribution, right? And so continue to grow, right? And, you know, whether we want to ultimately be known as just a source for investors can find good investment opportunities, right? Whether it's investing into multifamily, or maybe we partner with a really, really good retail operator and that person can do that piece of it. And so that's the longer term plan, but just getting all of our ducks to be kind of best in class.
Yeah. Yeah, you said a couple of really good things there, but like property management is hard, and like it is hard. That's why like when people are saying like they want to do like these smaller units, I always like say like, yeah, you can make money in this stuff, but like there's definitely a lot of brain damage that goes along with it. So like one of the things that's helped me scale is by actually partnering with you guys at Disrupt Equity. And then you guys are handling the property management, and that allows me to just focus and be clear headed on what I'm really good at. Right. And then that's the construction and doing construction at the property / doing construction as my everyday, driving my company, right? My construction company. And then I can then take the proceeds that construction company generates and then invest it in real estate deals. So it's been a great partnership in terms of that. And then you also said something else that was really, really good there is that, so you guys do multifamily A to Z, right? And for me, like thinking about like financials and digging into financials, and it was like so overwhelming. And it wasn't until I actually like slowed down and like really got an understanding of like how multifamily works and looking at the financials from a multifamily standpoint and getting really good at that then I could take that understanding and then apply it to other businesses. Like what you said, you guys are Disrupt Equity, not just Disrupt Multifamily. So you guys are taking the learnings that you got from multifamily, which is not as complex of a financial sheet, but you're taking that learning and looking at other opportunities and keeping your head up, which is really, really, really smart.
Absolutely. Right. It's, markets shift, come and go. Right. I love multifamily. I always love multifamily, but again, my investors, I already have investors. They want to diversify too, right? We want to be known as the place where investors can come get trusted, opportunities that we've at least vetted, right? It kind of has our stamp of approval and help them get into them and diversify. So that's kind of that's the bigger picture, right?
Yeah. Good. So, I know the deal that we're working on right now, Portalwood, it's 136 units. I was down in Houston last week. Yeah, last week. The weeks have kind of blurred together a little bit. But I was down in Houston last week. We've completed the raise on the deal. Like, so like in terms of like partnership, there isn't any other opportunity there. But I just wanted to have you kind of walk through that process. Like, what do you like about the deal? What don't you like about the deal? What do you look at when you're going after deals?
Yeah. So, that deal was one that, kind of accidentally came across our way, right? Like we had originally, not dug into it. And ultimately, I like that deal because it's an area of town that I do like, right? There's a brand new highway that just got built there and they're building the next section. So that whole, it's right next to, so kind of Houston, for those of you that know Houston, you have kind of the Woodlands, you have Kingwood, right? Those are sister master plan communities that were built pretty much at the same time. They're both, higher end communities. The only difference is Woodlands doubled down on business. Kingwood doubled down on more kind of more wood, right? Like more personal kind of things, a different approach, but both good parts. And this deal is kind of really between the two. And so they've connected, Houston has these concentric rings, right? You have downtown, then you have 610, which is a loop. You have Beltway 8, you kind of have this Highway 6, and now the new one is Grand Parkway 99. And so that is going to be, once completed, that loop is longer to drive around than it is to go from Houston to San Antonio. That's just how big this loop is, right? It's massive. And so, they've been opening up, they've probably finished 70% of it. And so the new section's opened up, which is now kind of made this area just really accessible to so much of Houston, right? So we like the area. I like the buyer that I'm buying it from. They've had it for, 27 years, right? And people that own for 27 years is very different than the people that own for 5 to 7 years like us, right? Our plan is we put money in up front, we cash flow, right? Once you kind of get the stabilization, and then you sell. Versus if you're buying a property for 27 years, you're doing maintenance as it comes up. You're fixing things immediately, or, you might be making the right investments. You're never putting a Band-Aid on, right? Because Band-Aids don't work. And so, it's a good thing to know who you buy from in their situation. So they've had it, and they're selling because they're trying to just, they're selling off all of their smaller stuff. It is a smaller deal, 136 units, right? They're trying to keep all their 200 plus stuff. And so it's that, and then just a lot going on in that area, right? A lot of developments going on. And so that's the good thing, but to the bad thing too, right? Like what is the bad things about the property? I'll say The units are a little smaller, but that's fine. Like they lease up, and looking at all the comps, they lease. That's not as much of an issue. It's more about, I don't know what's going to go in next door or across the street. So there might be a period of time where you might be competing, right? And luckily we're a B product, right? Anything new is going to be A, so kind of a different tenant base. But that could make it harder to lease for a period of time, right? That's the bad, but ultimately we're not in it for the 1 year play either, right? I'm in it for, the 5 to 7 of all of the kind of the value that's getting in there, right? And we didn't even realize this until after we had it under contract, but we are right across the street from a very big kind of planned development that's been going on, right? And across from us is still land, but it's nice to see that this is all part of the same group that is, making these investments, doing these good things. And so ultimately, clean deal, and underwrite strongly. We're buying at a good cap, right? A lot going on in the area versus that kind of deal, that kind of cap. Usually it's in a very rough area. And so you have to, everything has got to be, I want to tell everybody, every deal is risk adjusted returns. Don't just look at the returns, look at the risk adjusted returns. And so, you have to kind of keep that in your mind, right? Because it's easy to look, well, this is making this is making this. Yeah. But if you're in, in the heart of Detroit, like there's risk there, right? No offense to anyone from Detroit, but understand risk adjusted, even looking at a C class versus an A class, right? There are some pros to an A class versus a C class. If you're a C class property that's getting you 15% cash flow, which would be amazing, but you have a chiller on the property, right? Well, there's a risk that you have a $200,000 piece of equipment that's going to get replaced at some point in time because it's already 50 years old, right? Versus a brand new asset, you don't have that risk. And so understand these kind of risk adjusted returns, right? I think most people don't look at the risk part of risk adjusted. And so,
yeah, that's good. I've been taking all kinds of notes because man, you're dropping some really good stuff here. I want to open it up to other people. Like, you have questions, put it in the chat and I'll ask Feras. There's one thing there that you said in there was, that this is a smaller deal. Like, I remember when I would be dreaming about just buying a 100 unit plus deal, like just dreaming about it. Like, it was just like, it felt so far away. And it was like, it wasn't just like a dream that was a month or a year. It was like multiple years of like 100 plus deal. And now it's like to the point where it's like it's a quote unquote small deal,
Right. I mean, you're if it was a 250 unit, you wouldn't be phased, right? Now they both feel similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you kind of learn. And again, this is where it's about having partners, right? Not feeling like you have to do it all yourself.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that because, like I was saying before, like the two Clydesdales, it's like the vision. Like, you bring two people's vision together, it becomes so much bigger than your vision that you could ever had alone.
Yeah, 1 + 1 is 3, guys. So
yeah,
I mean, it's very true.
Yeah. So let me know if you have any questions for Feras. I'll keep ripping on. I love talking to Feras, but let me know if you guys have any questions. Oh, was that someone talking?
No, it was me. I was saying I'm up open book. So if someone wants to talk, I mean, I'll talk about whatever people want to talk about.
All right, cool. Yeah, here we go. We got a couple questions coming in. All right, one, how do you look at properties in the area that has high poverty rate, like 20%?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately you're again, risk adjusted, right? So, you might have a property that's humming along, right? Actually, I'll give you guys a story. There's a guy here in Houston that is known for basically buying these kind of dilapidated properties, right? Making them look really pretty, getting them filled, and then selling it, and then having his staff call that property and talk to tenants into coming to the next one, tell them, hey, we moved, we're this other place. And so he's kind of got the same tenant pool that is willing to kind of stick to him, right? And, it's really lipstick on a pig on steroids, right? But it is a lower poverty area. And unfortunately, those deals underwrite strongly. So the guy that's buying it looks like he thinks he's getting a good deal, right? And so my feedback is you don't just look at the property you're buying, look at the submarket, right? Dig into that market and look at what the other deals are doing, what have they gotten, right? And not just in terms of what do they buy or sell for, but like what rents are they getting? And don't just look at like apartments.com, go call the freaking property, right? I still to this day will call properties. I have a team of VAs and I have them do their market surveys, but properties that we're buying, I go tour them, I go call them and just go see what's going on, right? Like, if we're going to put several $1 million investment into this thing, I want to make sure that I'm not going to step on a landmine, and I don't want anyone else to make that mistake besides me, right? So I'm going to be the one to call it. I don't want someone else to have called and they misunderstood. It's get out there and roll up your sleeves, guys. It's, as much as this business can be done remote, there's a point in time that you got to roll up your sleeves. And that's one of them, right? Before you're buying the thing, go tour the properties. And, again, it goes back to, if it's in a poverty area, you might not look the role, make yourself look the role, right? And have a story as to, why you're coming in to tour that unit. And so, every deal can work if it's bought at the right price, right? And so going back, I don't care if it's 20th percentile or not. It's ultimately my modeling what's realistic in that area, right? And then again, goes back to the risk adjusted part of returns.
Yeah.
So just again, the extra risk that you're adding in there.
Yep. No, I love that. That's really good. And the second part of Harold's question was, what stops my progress in all this underwriting is crime and not meeting my desired investor return goals? And how do you deal with those issues? And actually, Harold, I'm gonna grab that one. I'm gonna tell you that your focus is maybe on the wrong deals, because there's so many good deals out there. Like, you need to turn around and go towards the good deals. Like, even if it's a different market, you don't have to stay here in DC. You don't have to stay in Maryland. You don't have to, if you're in a part of like Texas or Atlanta, you don't have to stay there. Like, go where the good deals are. They're out there. You need to find them, and you're underwriting and you're looking at deals. You just need to get more of the good deals instead of the bad deals.
Yeah. And I would answer that too. Like, so what if there's crime? Like, crime can be solved ish.
Right. And the ish is the important part, right? You can make your property be crime free. I give you guys the example, like that deal was rough. Like, when we turned that thing around and it, became a safe property, right? You can solve your property. You just can't solve the other property unless you can buy them all, right? But I'll give you an example. One of the nicest deals we looked at in terms of, for a 50-year-old property, it was one of the cleanest, most well-maintained deals. It was in a rough part of Atlanta. And the guy that owned it, he's just known for doing these kind of amazing things. And he literally bought or annexed, or whatever you want to call it, part of a street that was going into the property, right? So he can lock it down and not let people walk around and go to the property behind him that was a rougher one. So that his property was always 100% occupied and had a massive wait list, right? He was cash flowing and making good money, right? So again, even rough deals, like that was a deal that was rough. I mean, literally, this guy, I didn't realize he had done this trailer for like a pilot episode. And I can send you guys a link, but he's literally going around and he's got, what is it, like Rent Squad or something, like making himself look like FBI and going door to door. And he really worked hard that first 2 years to get that property turned around, get the right tenant base in there and get it cash flowing. Yeah. And so again, things can be solved, right? But now if you have the convenience store across the street that's a complete dump, well, and you can't control what happens there, right? You can control your property. You can't control that convenience store until you can buy it.
Right. So, totally agree with that. Like, you can't control an area. Like, it's like a stream. Like, if the area is a river and it's all bad stuff, like, you can have your property, but it's like you're going to eventually get overwhelmed by all the bad negativity that's going on there. So it's best to just find the good areas, the good deals out there, and go and invest in those deals. And then you get lifted up the same way as you would get pulled down in the bad area, in the bad deals, in the bad areas.
Great.
All right, cool. So we got another question from Abhishek. He said, new multifamily investor, what to do 10 to 20 unit deals in partnership? Any recommendations for Mastermind and networking?
Okay, so I don't know what you mean by what to do.
Like, he wants to like get into.
Want. I read that as what. Okay, want to do. Okay, so recommendations for Mastermind Networking. So I do help run a group, all part of it, Multifamily Masters, right? It's really meant to be a national meetup brand, and we can all coalesce under the same flag, really. And so I definitely recommend people going to meetups like this. Go join Multifamily Masters. There's a Facebook group for it, and it does have a mastermind component as well. And it's people can all read a book and get educated, right? It's more about seeing what others are doing, setting goals, and kind of accountability piece to it. So Garrison runs that. I do recommend that one. I think it's really meant to be a community, less about one-on-one coaching, right? Other good masterminds that for newer people, it depends on what you're looking for, right? Like Rod Khalif's program is pretty good as well. He doesn't put people with one-on-one coaches. Who else does a good mastermind? That's all I got, man. I'm trying to think, So, and I'm sure Oliver also would be happy to do kind of some coaching as well if people need it, right, Oliver?
No, I mean, like Rod's a great guy. He's got a really good program. And totally agree with that and with that there. Then we got Jason, right? Are there any deals to be had on CoStar, or is it mainly through broker relationships?
Yeah, so CoStar is also LoopNet, right? I mean, there's not really any deals there. I mean, it's all through broker relationships. Find the right, find a broker that you like, build real rapport, right? Be friends with these guys. Literally, one of them sent me, he went hunting, he hunted some deer and he turned it into, I guess he told me, yeah, we got the deer and we drove 4 hours to like the best sausage place in the country or something to make it. And, he mailed me a box of that. So that's literally what I'm going to eat this weekend because I told him I was going to try it this weekend. But, like these become friends, right? They, you get to know them. Same thing you do with any friends, right? You're thinking of them, you get them something, vice versa kind of thing. So get to know them because they are the ones that control the deals. And it's not about, you hear this off market thing all the time, right? It's not that off market means there's no broker involved. There's still a broker, right? Because as a seller, it'd be reckless for me to not use a broker to save an extra point. Like that's reckless because right now it's a hot market. They know who will pay up and who won't pay up.
Yeah, man, I love that, about you. And you totally transformed my thinking about it. Like when I used to think of brokers, I was just like, oh, they got, it's more transactional. And like, oh, I just need to get their, the deals that they have. Like, but no, when I started talking to you and you kind of were walking me through it, it's like, it makes total sense. It's like, you have to build a real relationship with these people. And then as you build a real relationship with these people, like you almost become family with them, just like you become family with your other friends. And then they're thinking of you first when they have their deals. So it's like, it's not a transactional thing where it's like, oh, I just need to get their deal or I just need to go to their website. It's like calling them and really having a real relationship with them, remembering when their daughter recital was, or remembering like, hey, he got off the phone and he had to go, play soccer with his kid. Like in bringing that up next time and having a real relationship, that totally transformed my thinking of how like the broker and real estate investor.
Not just a one and done kind of thing. And again, if you're going to be in this business for a long time, right, you want to build those relationships, right? You want to have that good track record, that good, people speak well of you, right? Like people know us. I tell every time we close a deal, I ask the buyer, were we the easiest buyer you've ever worked with? Sorry, I asked the broker, were we the easiest buyer you ever worked with? I want to be the easiest buyer, no drama. We do what we say we're going to do. And, it's important. And they tell I'll give you guys an example. We bought a deal from a broker. He's told two other brokers without them asking about us. Like they're like, yeah, so-and-so was talking about you. And then this broker is also investing in a deal that we're buying. And he referred a partner at a law firm friend. I mean, right. These brokers add value in a lot of ways, right? If you have a good track record, reputation, I mean, guess what? They're talking to sellers, they're talking to investors, they're talking to all the people that are important for your business too. So
yeah, love that. Then we got David. He asked, how much of a role has coaching played in your real estate journey?
So for me, man, my coaches are my partners, right? The people I work with. Talking to Oliver, that gives me my energy for coaching. Talking to my partner Ben, talking to people. Again, I'm a guy that will go in, read a lot, listen a lot, and then hop in. So I never, my partner Ben had coaching. I never did any coaching for me, but I was kind of able to piggyback on his experience, right? Maybe in some ways, but for me, the coaching side of things is really just talking to partners, man, and setting goals and figure out how do we kind of move forward.
Yeah. And you've also paid to be in like masterminds, like
actually that's a big
money. And in those masterminds, you're dealing with like the cream of the crop in terms of like guys in that specific industry. So like you're like a sponge, and you can see Feras now, he's asking all these questions and he digs deep with these people. So he's getting the real nitty gritty details to really launch his own business through those masterminds,
Yeah, and that's a good point. So we are part of Mastermind. That's what maybe it's kind of similar to the partners thing, right? Like I get the most value and learn the most from either people on my level or bigger, right? And I love to see the bigger people learn what are they doing that is helping them grow, right? And what are we doing differently or wrong or could do better, right? And that's how I learn. So being a part of that's awesome because you learn a lot, right? And it's we're all in the same playing field, right? Like let's say you have a room full of people that are all about the same place in their business. but everyone is doing something a little differently. If you can take the good from this one, good from this one, good from this one, now you have something a little bit better. And so that's where I learned the most, right? Talking to other people and just kind of getting that kind of inspiration and digging in and figuring out who really knows their stuff or who kind of has made it this far, right? But not really having all the things figured out. And so it's good to learn.
Yeah. And I also go back to like your experience at Microsoft. I mean, you saw a massive company continue to grow and scale. I mean, most people don't have that experience or have even, seen anything close to that. So that's a really huge like thought process in terms of like being able to scale where you currently are into where you want to go and what needs to happen to get to that. Like most people don't have that experience,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, you kind of see both ends of it. You can see the one person shop, the massive company, and there's kind of all the different steps along the way. And I tell this to people, I tell this to my brother a lot because I think it doesn't click. It's that, running a $20 billion business is very different than running a $1 billion business, which is very different than running a $100 million business, which is very different than running a $10 million business, which is very different than running a $1 million business, which is very different than running your $100,000 business, right? Like they're very different, and you have to realize the steps and the differences along the way, and don't pretend like you're that one and try to make those types of decisions before you're getting there.
Yeah, that was good. That was really good.
No, I mean, I think a lot of people like, and maybe I get frustrated sometimes, and, by that. It's like, hey, this company is doing that. I'm like, yeah, but they're a multi-billion-dollar company. They can afford to go take a loss for 10 years if they want to, right? Like very different mentality. And so you have to realize that piece of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. And that's why when you were asking too, like, hey, like, where's a good whether you were responding to the mastermind thing, like Rod Cleef's mastermind is great because like he works with people who want to buy the 10, 20 unit properties and operate it. And then like he gives all of that training, you know what I mean? Whereas like we're focused more on like helping like the business owner that's got a bunch of things going on, but they still want to have exposure to multifamily real estate and from like investment standpoint. So that's good. And then Jason asked, would you ever buy a deal in DC that has a negative cash flow after debt service on the hopes of being able to raise rents in the future? The cap rates around here are ridiculously compressed, even with COVID.
So the answer to that is a couple of things. If you have deep enough pockets and you're willing, it's risk adjusted, right, guys? I would do a deal in DC, but I wouldn't go in, to your point about it being negative cash flow. If you can, I would go in just less leveraged, right? There's a point in time where it's positive cash flow, assuming your insurance and your taxes don't put you underwater, right? But you can just go in less leveraged. And, by being less leveraged, you can at least generate a positive cash flow just so you're not having to scramble every month to pay a negative rate.
Yeah. That's a good understanding. So like the reason why I got in real estate was to have real estate pay for my lifestyle. Like if you're buying deals that are negative cash flow, there you go again. Now you're having to take money out of your pocket to give to the real estate deal. So it's really dependent on what you want. Like reason why I'm here to invest in real estate is to have real estate pay for me, my family, and all the people that I help and contribute, even long past when I'm not here anymore. So, I like cash flow in real estate.
No, same, right? And ultimately, like why, if you want cash flow, like why would you go do a DC deal, right? Go find something that cash flows elsewhere.
Yep. Yeah. Good. And then we got Harold. Harold asked a question. Do you use buyer brokers that you pay to find properties or something else?
Yeah. So to date, not formally, but we got really good relations with brokers, and I've told them all, hey, if by all means, please use me, use my brand, let us give you offers and go help source offers from brokers. So we're kind of getting more towards that, but just know, like most buyers, brokers won't do it if they don't already know you and kind of build that relationship, right? Because, the real buyer broker you want is not just the guy that gets deals from other brokers. You want the broker that's actually out there that could have listed it to his audience, right? That they haven't formally listed it, but instead they're going to show it to you first, right? And don't think you're going to get like a massive discount, right? Like that's not going to happen, not in this market. It's more about getting first picks at the good deals, right? At the price points that they're going to go for, to make sure you're the one that gets it versus someone else.
Yep. Yeah, and you also said earlier too, you have an army of VAs. tell everybody how many VAs you have.
No, absolutely right. Army is its own thing, and every day I'm kind of thinking about more things to use it. And I'm gonna set a goal for you, Oliver. By the end of April, make sure you have your full time. You and Leah have your full time VA. All right, we're gonna get this figured out because
How many do you have?
I need to set up a one-on-one soon with both of you guys. Because I was gonna walk you guys through our VAs and the process and what they do.
How many do you have?
8, I think, across the company. So
Yeah, that's leverage. That's leverage right there. Cool. So we got Harold asks, is it okay to reach out and contact either? Yeah. So yeah, Feras, how do people get in contact with you?
Yeah, Feras at disruptequity.com. Feras at disruptequity.com.
Cool. So last couple questions I have for you, Feras, is what's the most important lesson that you've learned to date in like real estate?
Most important lesson. It's just be more capitalized than you might think you do, right? Like that's maybe what it is, right? It's like the mistakes that I've made or the pain that we've dealt with are the cases where we could have been more capitalized, but we didn't because you're trying to squeeze all the returns that you can. But ultimately, like raising another, let's say you're raising $4 million, right? Raising another $200,000-300,000 additional on top of everything that you think you need just to have it, it's almost a rounding error in the total returns, right? So it's something you should always do. And so I'm learning that, and it's about having, being better capitalized and like really just leaving that money there. And it depends on the deal, right? You learn deeper value adds, you really want to be a lot more capitalized. But that's maybe the biggest lesson because it's like the stress that we've dealt with in those situations, right?
Yeah.
Where you just that, and then lenders, take forever to give you the draw. And so you've spent $300,000 to have a vendor replace whatever. Let's just make up something, the roofs. And then the lender takes, the 6 months to give you that $300,000. Well, now your vendor is waiting, which you don't want to be really putting them on, making them wait for it. And at the same time, sorry, the alarm went off. I just turned it off if y'all heard that. And you're just kind of in this game between, well, hey, like I'm waiting on the lender money and I don't have all the money to pay you. And, it just kind of, you don't want to be in that situation. It's not fun. So,
yeah. Yep. Totally agree with that. It's almost like being at when you're a kid and you're at the playground and you're on the monkey bars. You don't want to be halfway through the monkey bars and run out of juice. You know what I mean? To get to the end. Yeah. You gotta be able to hang on and thrive because there's so much opportunity out there. You got to be able to get to that point where you can actually receive the opportunity.
mm-hmm.
The last thing I got for you is what failure have you actually experienced that you'd like to, if you had a chance to do over, you'd do it over?
In real estate, what failure?
Yeah.
What failure did we experience? Actually, I'll tell you. Yeah, the one of the biggest problem we have with is, this is why we started a management company. It's just third-party management, right? And the failure might have been, the second you kind of feel nervous about the management company, rip that Band-Aid off immediately, right? That's because like we have a property that we took over and had like $400,000 of outstanding payables that we've had to just grind it out and just get the property performing, which is the first hard challenge. Now you're actually accumulating more payables because they blew the money on stupid things and didn't get the units ready. So you actually have to spend more, and then you have to kind of burn that down. It's a lot of work, right? And so that's really the failure. It's that we, and I remember, like literally a month or two after takeover, you're like, man, these guys don't feel like they're on top of it. And, at the time, my partner Ben was like, well, the holidays are coming up and Thanksgiving and all these other things. It's going to be harder to change. And we let it roll to Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then we took over in January. And, in hindsight, it's like, man, that extra 2 months, we could have just made so much less headache if we would have just made that transition sooner. That's probably, that is the biggest failure. It's just, it's painful. People, guys, this business is all about people, and that's what makes it hard.
Yeah. That's even just a good point. Just as a whole, it's like, even in business, it's like someone that quits, right? They've quit like 3 or 4 months ago. Like they didn't just quit right then. They quit 3 or 4 months ago. So it's better just if you notice like you know, someone's down, you've had the conversations with them and it's not going in the right direction. You already know that they've quit on the.
It's like, you know, and it's, you know, I don't know if we want to get into all this, but, you know, it's like with employees, you kind of realize, right, if you're thinking you need to let someone go, it's going to happen one way or another, right? And so letting it drag out longer, is that the right decision? You're probably going to regret it later.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, Feras, I really appreciate you. You've always given so much value to me, and just always been such a good person.
It's always fun and always happy to share. So if people have questions, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and let Feras know if you got value. Put it in the chat if you got value from today's important.
No, I get value. I learned from talking to people, right? The questions people have are, I mean, that's just interesting to see what people are struggling with, right? What people are wondering, you know, January of 2021 is very different than what people were wondering January of 2020, right? So it's good to get a pulse on, you know, what people are thinking about. So I always enjoy it.
Yeah, everybody's like, thanks, Feras. That was fantastic. Thanks.
You guys are welcome.
Great info today. Excellent information. Thank you. Thanks for the valuable time. This was great. Thanks, Feras.
Thanks to Oliver for hosting it and putting it together. I mean, it's
Very
always
informative.
So,
yeah.
If you guys need anything, you guys know how to get a hold of me, how to get a hold of Oliver.
And really appreciate everybody for the call. And we'll see you next month.
Really. All right, likewise. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please click subscribe down below and give me a thumbs up. You can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook at Oliver Fernandez 3. I have new videos just like this one dropping every week. So drop a comment down below and let me know what you want to hear next. Until then, keep growing and keep learning. Just do it.